My name is Bart Hawkins Krebs. I know quite a few people here, not everyone, and I'm really glad that the word got around a lot this week. This local event is very much a last-minute sort of thing, which turns out many of them are. You're in very good company because there are more than 125 of these gatherings across the country today, from coast to coast to coast, from St. John's, Newfoundland, to Tofino on Vancouver Island, all the way to Repulse Bay, Nunavut, and scores of places in between. And more than half of these gatherings were only planned in the last few days. So I was the person who a few days ago agreed to be a coordinator or host for this so that the event was officially on, and that's why you get to hear my voice for a couple of minutes. And I'm not a professional speaker, and not only that, I couldn't get my teleprompter on the back of my bike today, so you'll have to put up with my paper notes. And I'll speak to a few of the major themes for these rallies right across the coast, right across the country. And Rich Tyson is going to talk a bit about some of the positive things that local people are doing. And if there are other people who want to speak as well, that's great. This is, in some ways, you could say it's a political rally. And not everybody wants to have anything to do with politics. It's got a rather poor reputation just lately. But this is about a lot more than politics. It's about physics, and it's about family. It's about physics because what we're doing to the climate is a physics experiment gone really bad. And climate scientists have been warning us for 30-some years now, and increasingly united and increasingly with increasing urgency that we really have to address this crisis, because it's already, we know it's already going to get a lot worse before it starts getting better. But the longer we wait to do anything about it, the worse it'll be for our children. And that's where family comes in. A lot of us know by this point that even within our lifetimes, we're likely to see some pretty serious effects in more storms, higher storm surges, more deluges, cloudbursts, hotter heat waves. We're seeing it already, but we know that our children and our grandchildren are going to see a lot worse unless we somehow find ways to cut back on fossil fuels really quickly and drastically. These rallies have three basic themes which were on the posters that many of you received via email or Facebook. Climate disaster, reckless expansion, and dangerous pipelines. Climate disaster. There's a broad scientific agreement that if the climate warms up more than 2 degrees Celsius, civilization itself will be threatened, along with countless species of animals and plants. And we're on track to blow right through that ceiling of 2 degrees in a generation or two. So scientists know what we have to do in order to head that off. It's pretty simple. We have to keep at least 75% of the current fossil fuels in the ground. Stop digging them up. Stop looking for more. Now in Canada, we have one of the great, in sense of huge, collections of really dirty, inefficient fossil fuels, the tar sands. Our government is making it the #1 national project to dig up those tar sands and send them into the air as carbon emissions as fast as possible. They're making money at it. Some people are. In fact, the industry has set a goal very clearly to triple tar sands production in the next 15 years. This is called, and the Canadian government is just pulling out all the stops at home, in the US, in Europe, to promote the tar sands. Remove every barrier to digging them up. They call themselves a conservative government. Is it conservative to ignore climate science, to gamble away our grandchildren's environment, their futures? It's reckless, it's careless, it's anything but conservative. The Stephen Harper government represents conservative the same way Rob Ford represents law and order. Now, the expansion of the tar sands is not going to happen without a lot more pipelines. That's why they're trying to build pipelines every direction from the tar sands, to the south to Texas, to the west to the Pacific coast, to the east to get it out that way to Europe. They're even talking about, if all else fails, send it north to the Arctic Circle and send it through the Arctic Ocean. The reason they need all this capacity is because they can't get it to foreign markets now, and it's selling at a big, big discount compared to any other oil. Now that worries them, obviously. Not that they're worried about the climate, they're worried about their business plan. They can't continue to they can't triple production unless they start getting world prices for their very dirty oil. So they've planned pipelines in many places, and the pipelines are not getting a warm welcome anywhere. They're delayed in the US. The northern gateway to the BC coast looks very doubtful. They've even got a small one, as pipelines go, right through here, right through Northumberland, a few kilometers from here, and they've applied to ship tar sands oil through that. That one didn't receive a warm welcome either. In fact, there was a storm of opposition in the last couple of months, and the Ontario government and the City of Toronto both took notice of that opposition, and they both demanded much stronger safety guarantees and much better emergency plans than Enbridge had shown. So there again, we have an example where people have stood up and they've had an influence. The oil companies keep on saying, oh no, everything's on track, everything's on track. But at the same time, they're running ads everywhere about these clean, wonderful pipelines because they're trying very hard to buy PR. They're spending a lot of money on it, but they can't make people believe it's all safe. Locally, just a couple more words about Line 9. Line 9 goes right across southern Ontario, and it crosses dozens of small streams and rivers just a few miles from Lake Ontario. And if that diluted bitumen spills into the Ganaraska River or into Cobourg Creek or any number of other streams along this coast, it can be into Lake Ontario within 2 hours. That's faster than Enbridge is even going to have a team on site to look at the damage, let alone clean it up. So that's one of many reasons that a lot of people in Ontario have organized around Line 9. So there you have it, the three closely linked themes climate disaster, the reckless expansion of the tar sands, and dangerous pipelines. That's why we need to defend our climate. That's why we're out here to defend our communities. Thanks for listening.
Yeah? Is that right?
Yeah, they don't say when. Everybody so far it's going to be tomorrow.
Rich Tyson will share some things about what local groups are doing to work on a transition right now, because there is a lot going on. And if anybody else wants to speak, please do come forward as well.
Thanks, Bert. So there's at least 3 organizations in our communities that are working on issues of various kinds. Lots of you are members already of these organizations. Some of you aren't. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about those 3. And if you'd like to get involved, maybe if you just give me a slip of paper with your name and your phone number and your email address, and I'll make sure that you get information on them. So if you want to do that before you leave, that would be great. One of them is Sustainable Cobourg. So that's if you're in Cobourg, this is an organization that is working on sustainability issues. One of the committees on that is the Bicycle Action Committee. Rick Nonicus is one of the leaders on that committee. Jeanette Johnson's on the board. They're working on the Bicycle Action Committee is working on promoting cycling. You've probably noticed in Cobourg that there's a lot more bike lanes than there used to be. There's signs, promoting cycling, share the road. There's policies that are changing and improving all the time, and it's all because the Bicycle Action Committee went to council and said, we want Cobourg to be a really bicycle-friendly town because that's the way we should live in the future, right? It's good for our health, it's good for the environment. Let's promote it. It's good for tourism. And the Bicycle Action Committee has done a lot of really good work in that regard. So you'll see more and more changes as time goes on, because each time there's a budget, the Bicycle Action Committee goes to the town and says, we want at least $15,000 or $20,000 in your budget promoting cycling, and they did that last week. And if you're at council, you heard. Was it you who did the presentation, Rick?
Bruce Blair.
Bruce Blair did the presentation. So that's an example. So if you want to join Sustainable Cobourg, it has a food committee if you're interested in food issues. It has a town hall committee if you're interested in planning issues. For example, I think we should really be working on a new vision for neighborhoods. And the Tannery District, if you know that area in Cobourg, it's sort of south of the tracks, north of University, west of George Street, east of Ontario, that whole area, a lot of derelict, property in there. Could be a net zero sustainable neighborhood, meaning you produce all the power that you need in your neighborhood and you produce the food you need in your neighborhood. We have to think of new vision of how to live in the future that's good for us, it's healthy, and it's good for the environment. So those are some of the projects that are being worked on by these organizations. Go Green Together is another organization. It's going through a revisioning process, and it'll happen in a week. There's a meeting next week where we're going to talk about how to take Go Green and make it into an organization that really promotes sustainability in the future. I think it's going through a transition, and you can be a part of that. So let me know. I'll make sure you get the invitation to that meeting. I think it's next weekend. Rick, do you remember what the date is?
Saturday morning, 10 o'clock.
Saturday morning, 10 o'clock at the Go Green Together office, which is
739 Darcy.
739 Darcy, right across from the community center. And then lastly, there's an organization called Northumberland Community Power Cooperative. So the old arenas, if you know that, on Furnace Street, the Baltimore Arena, and a building near the train station, an old industrial building, if you know the one that's just south of the tracks on Princess Street, they're all going to get solar. And Northumberland Community Power Cooperative is going to build that solar. And it's looking at other projects where we can expand renewable energy in the county. You can become a member of that. You can become a member of the co-op as costs $25 for a lifetime membership, and then we're going to come in January or so and invite you to invest in your community through developing renewable energy. We're going to be issuing bonds as a cooperative to build these co-ops out, or build these renewable energy projects out, rooftop solar projects. So those are like 3 examples of things that are happening in our community, all of which you could get involved in, all of which you need your energy and can make a difference.
Yes, of course. Can I ask you a question, Rich?
Yes.
I work with low-income people, and we've got a member in the coalition really keen to see the tannery lands with the component of low-income housing.
Absolutely.
And I'm just wondering, like, what are these groups doing that would get low-income people involved? I mean, they tend to be very green because they don't have the money to be otherwise. And I'm just, when I'm listening to all this, I'm thinking, okay, what is there here that low-income people can relate to and get motivated about being part of it?
Yeah.
So I'm just putting that question forward.
Well, I can tell you one example of what's happening right now. So Neil Hamilton, I don't know if you know Neil, he does energy audits. He is part of Go Green. And there is a low-income program where people can upgrade their energy efficiency of their building. There's a program that provides money to do that. He does the energy audits for it. If you want to,
It costs like $400.
no, I'm not sure about that. I think the low-income program is not like that. I'm not sure. I don't know all the details. But if you email me, I'll make sure you get the details, because I know Neil does lots of these things. And there's lots of demand for it, so I can send you. I'll have them send you the details.
I mean, it's a challenge, but I just felt for a long time that the environmental issues and the low-income issues are so intertwined, but we don't always recognize that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think if you come to the meeting next week for Go Green, make that point. Argue that.
There's, I was just going to follow, and this sort of ties in with what's been said. Well, I'll start with, my name's Lee Thompson, and I live south of Castleton, so I overlook Cold Creek watershed and the pipelines. And the Cold Creek watershed is part of the watershed that flows into the Trent River and, of course, into Lake Ontario. And there are 3 major pipelines that go right through there. They leak very frequently. There's usually construction every few months of some kind because those pipelines aren't up to snuff. And it really is, there are people with wells, farmers with operations, all the way along there. So it's not just a town issue, and this is Northumberland, so we're considering all the residents. And of course it's going to go into the lake where everybody gets their water. And I tie into what was said earlier about the promotional. We've seen so much promotional effort by Enbridge and trying to push this. And the reality is that there aren't. It's everything about this whole vision of promoting the tar sands and fossil fuel development is short term. It doesn't matter if there's a discount or if it gets the fact is that the exports of our natural resources and raw resources are causing a lowering of the dollar, which is killing the rest of our economy. The fact is that the entire exploitation of fossil fuels is a dead end. It's going to end. Any jobs that Alberta has now in the tar sands or anywhere else are going to be finished. There are going to be no more jobs. So why isn't the energy and the subsidies that the government could put into creating an actual clean environment and a clean economy based on a clean environment, the kinds of alternatives that we all know about that are entirely doable, cheaper, will provide stable, long-term jobs for low-income people, for the long term, clean up the environment. I mean, it's just, why wouldn't they? Because there are short-term profits to be made, because we have a system in place that benefits the short-term owners of investment. And what do we have now? We have Harper running around the world setting up trade deals that aren't trade deals. What are they? They give investors the right to sue our governments at every level for environmental protection laws. So the CETA, the Comprehensive Environment and Trade Agreement that Harper's trying to set up with Europe, the deal with the Trans-Pacific Partnership, the one with China, they're all allowing investors to sue. NAFTA allows investors to sue governments, provincial, federal, municipal, that set up environmentally protective laws, or laws that protect health, or laws that protect domestic small business. That's from the Trade Justice Network. So people are unemployed, they need work, there's low-income people that could use decent food and housing and clean water and jobs and a good welfare rate that the government can provide instead of giving subsidies to the most destructive companies on the planet. And I have a right to clean water in my watershed, so do the other neighbors. The earth has a right to life and health. And well, as my friend was saying as we were driving here today, we just don't understand what is the mentality behind governments that will destroy not only the environment but the economy and the health. Okay, and I also heard this morning that 30%, there was a poll in the States that now, even in the United States, among people who have previously been climate change deniers, that now only 30% are climate change deniers, because the International Panel on Climate Change came out with those numbers, that we are on this trajectory towards it. So I see that a lot more can be done. I'm not sure, and I'm concerned as well, that it's only that the focus for environment is, I'm happy that it's local. I'm glad that there are these organizations locally that are doing good work, but I don't want to see it tied to financial investment in bonds. I'm concerned about that, because if that's the only thing we're doing, we're ignoring the fact that we cannot sustain a global economy that is run by the most powerful investors on the planet for short-term profit. And even if, so it's undemocratic ultimately, and Harper's process has been undemocratic. Harper has restricted the amount of input that could go into this entire process of discussion about Line 9 and the other pipelines. And I think it's undemocratic to force people to buy into a green vision. I think it has to be, that's okay if it's free and if it's, there's opportunities out there for people, great. But let's not limit ourselves to that. Let's look at the bigger picture and what we need to do to ensure that the country as a whole is shifting to a vision that isn't based on the whims of the richest people. Even if it's green, democracy demands that everyone is equal. All of us have an equal right to participate, whether we have money or not. And
Lee,
yeah.
I'm thinking of our biggest roadblock we're up against,
Yeah.
and I'm quoting this in a sense, that the people we elect at every level, municipal, provincial, and federal, to work in the public interest, have consistently let us down. Mm-hmm. And if we want to know why that happens, and why it's happening here and at every level, there are 3 words that explain it. Follow the money.
Yeah.
That is every time what's doing it. To say that my local representatives of Port Hope, they're nice people, they are, every one of them is under constant pressure to go along with what the big boys want to do for money now.
Yeah.
And to imagine that it can be easily hidden as bribery, it's just letting them know the opportunities that are out there if they don't raise their voices. In Port Hope, it's this crazy incinerator insanity is going on, and you gotta find amongst any of our elected representatives a single one who will stand up and say this is crazy. is the last thing we need. We don't want to. We're already got a stigma it's not going to go away, and we want to become the garbage capital of North America now. It's insane. But it's follow the money, and we got to learn how to follow the money and then how to expose it.
How to expose that.
We got to do that to beat this thing.
I can see a couple. I'm just going to insert myself into the speakers list because I see a couple of people have already left. After the last event, the last Lead Now event that was held here, I guess about 6 months or a year ago, I can't remember, there was agreement amongst the much smaller group that was here to set up a local organization, and it's very, very informal. And it's centered on a group on Facebook. It calls itself the Northumberland Coalition for Democracy. It's non-sectarian, not associated with any political party. We are kind of, or almost everybody who's part of the coalition is connected to Lead Now in some way, shape, or form. So if you're comfortable being on Lead Now's mailing list and coming to events like this, you'd be comfortable with what's happening at the coalition. The idea is that we'd be in a position to organize local events that aren't connected to something national by way of that Facebook group. So please, if you're on Facebook, if you're not, I envy you, but if you are, like I am, please join the group and stay up to date on what's happening in the area.
Hi, my name is Rod Anderson. I spent most of my professional life as a chartered accountant, but before that I graduated in maths, physics, and chemistry, and I apologize that I haven't done enough research on the climate change. But what worries me is I think that none of us take this sufficiently serious. We think, yes, it would be nice to be cleaner, it would be nice to be, and so on and so on. I think that, Bart, you mentioned talking about going through the number 2 and destroying civilization. I mean, I think that we are on the cusp. If we continue this way, we are basically going to murder all our grandchildren. It's going to be the end of the world. It's going to be, or it's, at least it's going to be the end of Homo sapiens' habitation of the world. And it just seems to me that is so serious. I can't back that up immediately with a scientific projection, but I believe that's where we are. And it's not just a question of wouldn't it be nice to be a little greener. It's a question of do you want your grandchildren to live or not?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Sure. You got it.
I'd just like to bring to everybody's attention too that my name is Jim Jameson. I live in Brighton municipality of Brighton. But of the pipelines and the plans for moving oil and stuff around, Enbridge and Trans-Canada pipelines and the other pipelines in the States, whenever they've had a spill, they have never cleaned it up 100%.
Yeah.
There are some places down in southern Alberta and down in south of the border from Alberta where Enbridge had pipelines that burst. And on one occasion, they restarted the pipeline 4 times before the repair crews got out there to check the thing, because they first reported it was a natural gas leak and they sent guys with sniffers around. But even on the coast, they haven't cleaned up the coast of Alaska from the Valdez going down. There's still, you can still find oil on the coast of Alaska from that tragedy. If they can't guarantee some kind of a super safe or a safer way of shipping oil, and they say, well, we can ship it by track, but we've all seen what's happened lately with trains. Also, I'm going to mention one more thing. Slipped my mind. Oh, the number 9 pipeline that they're talking about. They've decommissioned 3 pipelines across eastern Canada now. The number 9 pipeline is as old as those pipelines. They still think it's serviceable, but they want to check reverse the flow. It's a pipeline that goes from the east to the west. They want to reverse the flow in it so they can ship the bitumen to the east. but it is probably in the same shape as the 3 that they've already decommissioned, that it's just not practical to upgrade.
And on top of all of this, we have the issue of the gasification plant, the NTEC REN that could be spewing toxins all over our counties. It's tragic. We've got to clean it up.
But a safer way of shipping oil is a bit like talking about a safer way of shipping hydrogen bombs.
Yeah.
Because, I mean,
Yes, you got
basically
it.
the oil is going to destroy our planet.
Yeah.
And whether we ship it safely or not, that's the more important thing, not the spills, but the fact that greenhouse gas emissions are going to be the end of us.
Yeah. On that point, the Line 9 pipeline was the first one, the first hearings to be conducted under new rules that the Harper government rammed through in an omnibus bill this thick. Basically, where you had to apply to be given permission to send a letter into the hearing. The application form was 10 pages long, just to find out if you were allowed to send in a letter. Furthermore, they said one of the things the hearings will not deal with, don't bring it up, is emissions of carbon. That's not going to be on the table. Furthermore, the pollution in northern Alberta and the gunk that's flowing into the rivers and going upstream, going downstream from there, don't bring that up. You can only bring up just the issues of a spill in a local area. So, and we won't have an environmental assessment. So it's all rigged, in this case, very obviously, to get these pipeline proposals through as fast as possible. And fortunately, in spite of those rules, there were hundreds and thousands of people in Ontario who didn't just decide to look the other way.
And I think keep in mind as well about the health issues and the First Nations people who have been devastated in their communities with cancer as a result, and all of us through the gas and like fracking that is being used to get gas to further develop the tar sands, and all of those have incredible implications on our health, and everyone is affected by that. And my understanding is that was another part that wasn't included in the issues that were allowed to be discussed, right?
That's right.
I mean, you know, you can't talk about the fact that your water is going to be polluted, or the fact that you're getting cancer from all of the residual carcinogens in the process, either directly in the tar sands. There were farmers out there that all of a sudden saw the stuff bubbling up in their fields, right? I mean, you know, it's just so, and then broadly that, of course, the air is going to affect all our health, whether it's I've heard anywhere from 220 to 250, that the year 220 or the year 250, that it could reach the point of irreversible climate change if those feedback loops kick in after a 2-degree increase. And the estimate is that if the feedback loops kick in that cause irreversible climate change, then we're on that trajectory to devastation of inhospitable climate, as we're seeing already with the storms. And that was the poll in the States that was 30% now. It was because of the storms that finally people were waking up to see that climate change was affecting them directly. Of course,
Can I ask a question here?
Yeah.
We've got millions of statistics. We know how bad it is.
Yeah.
1 or 2 simple steps that each of us could do tomorrow to make us less dependent on oil. It's manageable, affordable, and likely to be followed through on.
stop the tar sands, push
No, in our lives,
a
today,
national,
what can I do?
a national energy plan.
Bike instead
A
of
national
driving.
alternate
there's
energy
one.
Bike
plan.
instead of driving. If you're gonna
Both.
go on a vacation,
Both.
do it in Northumberland County.
This is the right kind of thinking.
Yeah.
We're constantly focusing our minds on where is the better source of more energy. Everybody wants more energy for this, that, and the other thing. Rick, am I right that really as a society we haven't even begun to conserve? Who in this, even gathering here, has has suffered in their life because of conserving. Frankly, if anything, we've benefited. We've gotten healthier and happier. But we got to give up this notion that there is an alternative. And by God, we've got to sit hard on the nuclear guys who are claiming to be a clean way of getting loads of energy, all we want. It's a blatant lie from top to bottom, and always will be. It's the only one that will never go away. And so what we got to do is begin to, at the grassroots level is the only place it can happen, but it's going to have to be, you got to change the way you think, and you got to change the way you live. And we got to, every one of us has to cut back some way in the amount of energy we eat up all the time, eh? Isn't that right?
Yeah, we need all of the, I think we need to do all of these on
All right, this sounds good. This sounds good. All right, so next steps?
Well,
all of the above.
one other thing I'd like to mention that will apply to some of us perhaps and not to others. But there's a movement really growing across the continent, especially on university campuses, among students who realize what they're looking at for later in their life. And that is to get endowment funds, to get investments, to get pension funds out of fossil fuels. Get them out of fossil fuel stocks. Don't have your money or your institution's money invested in the destruction of your children's future, but pull it out so that the fossil fuel industry has to lose the kind of power they have now. One way to do that is to start getting the money out of there and getting the money into things that are positive. So if some of you may have investments of your own, many people will be involved with a university or a church or a school, pension fund, and there's a very widespread movement. If you go online to, for instance, fossilfree.ca, you can find out how to join up, how to find out what's happening in your area. Places like Trent University, University of Toronto, etc., that have endowment funds, they've all got active campaigns, and that's another way to get involved.
But you got to tell them that you're not going to give them any more money for what they're trying to do if they continue to invest in. Well, for me, it's the nuclear, it's the military, and certainly it's the fossils. You got to stop investing in them.
Yeah.
And we got to let them know that we're stopping.
Yeah.
When, even when we get no end of stuff in the mail that are little presents, useless crap we can't use, no end of Christmas cards, no end of little notepads, you name it. And I'm writing to them now and saying, if you can afford to send me a present, you don't need my money. And we gotta keep letting them know from the grassroots level that we're not happy with the way. Think of the industry for those crazy cards and notepads and the rest of it. We're buried in this stuff.
Here's another thing. I think we also need to articulate to the leaders that we don't accept pipelines. So politically, okay, fine to be nonpartisan, that's great. But already Justin Trudeau has been promoting the pipelines, saying he's not opposed to the pipelines. So we need to, Harper is clearly where he stands. So then there's the Greens and the NDP and whoever else is possibly can be pushed towards, and Trudeau should be pushed too, towards saying no.
Well, how about,
he was promoting it down in the States a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, but how about pushing him to stop dreaming of being the Prime Minister of a majority government, which is never going to happen. Never. Under any possible circumstances. And to listen to Joyce, what's her name in BC, who's saying, for God's sake, get the three parties together, get this government out of there, get proportional voting, and get coordinate, and well, get and get a government where the legislation is in the interests of the majority of the people. And we got to all fight for this sort of thing if we want any chance of influencing them.
I heard that the Wynne government as well decided not to use its option to push for an environmental assessment of Line 9. It had that, the Wynne government has an option to push for an environmental assessment of Line 9. We have an obligation, I agree, to not use as much stuff and ride bicycles and everything else. But we also have an obligation to push our current provincial government to use the tools that she has, and the government has, to push and ask for an environmental assessment of Line 9. It's our democratic right.
I'm sort of wondering if there's a fellow who was talking about the Northumberland Coalition. There you are. The idea of perhaps the coalition writing to people in the coalition, signing a petition or whatever, and however it works, coalition, and sending stuff to people like Kathleen Wynne about an environmental assessment on 9.
That's important. We should hear it,
And
right?
getting together.
Okay, so you're
gotta
pushing
hear
for
you.
people to sign up to with this
You're not
gentleman.
speaking loud enough.
Okay. What I was suggesting is perhaps the Northumberland Coalition that this fellow was talking about earlier, that you can join via Facebook, that the coalition send a statement or a petition, whatever, to
good.
Kathleen Wynne about an environmental assessment
Absolutely.
of 9.
Yeah.
What about getting some of the schools involved? Public schools, the high
Darn
schools?
good idea.
It's their issue too. They should be here.
They're our hope.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's one child here today. Good for you.
Yay!
You gotta speak to the kids.
She chose what to put on her sign. She's aware of the situation. And while she was making her sign, she said, those guys don't care about my Canada. They care about money.
That's what it is.
Can I make a,
It upsets me that a 6-year-old can realize that.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm a bush.
can I make a procedural suggestion? This was meant to be like a quick demonstration of our unhappiness with the current federal government's policy, well, in today anyway, climate change, but in regard to, I think, a number of things over time. Yeah, instead of turning it into a meeting where we're all throwing out suggestions and there's nobody who's actually got the empowered or has volunteered even to take those suggestions and do something with them, can I suggest that we either agree to do this somewhere other than on a sidewalk at some point in the near future, or, and I'm not pushing the coalition, I'm just saying the Facebook group is there, sign up, make your suggestions, we can have a bit of a discussion, and then we can take what happens there and turn it into a face-to-face meeting over at the library or some other place that's more comfortable, and where some of us who have difficulty standing for extended periods of time can fully participate in what's going on. Okay? So I'm tempted to vote for Bart as our interim chair anyway. See, that'll teach you to volunteer. And if people can get their contact information to Bart, if you aren't able to participate in the Facebook group, I promise that over the next few days I will pay more attention to it than I have over the past couple of months. And if there's interest, if there's 10 or 15 people who are interested in a meeting, I'll take on responsibility for, well, Bart will chair and collect people's contact information. I'll take on responsibility for booking a space.